What is up, guys? 7Slot Motorsports back with another video, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the Hydro7Slot build and where it stands as of right now. In the past couple weeks, a couple things have changed. I have good news, I have bad news regarding the build. In this video I want to address the things that I mentioned in the last video regarding the transmission. Sorry if in the background you guys hear planes. I happen to be close to an airport right now. This is very close to where I filmed my first two videos, and I don't think planes were flying over when I made those first two videos. But anyways, back to the topic at hand. So in this video I want to address the good and the bad that has happened to the build in the past couple weeks. I have gone down a deep financial rabbit hole with this build just to get it back into operating condition, and it's truly not even operating as good as I would have hoped, but it is what it is. You live and you learn. And yeah, so there are good news to the build regarding 4 parts that have been changed into the build, 4 upgrades I guess you can call them. They are all cosmetic for the most part. One of them does have some functionality to it, and there's also bad news. So I'm gonna go ahead and just start off with the bad news, rip the band-aid off, and kind of just get that over with to end off on the good news with the build. So starting off with the bad news. So in the first or last video that I did regarding this build, I mentioned that my transmission was going out. It was breaking apart, falling apart. I had to swap it out soon, or I would have just been left stranded in the middle of the road at some point eventually, or just the strain that it goes ahead and puts on the motor would have left me stranded. So one of the two things were gonna left me stranded, either the transmission or the strain that the transmission was putting on the motor was gonna leave me stranded. So just to go ahead and get that over with, my transmission was going out. I came across a shop up north that was selling a stock JKU Rubicon transmission, the same automatic transmission, and I figured, you know what, I have to go ahead and get the transmission swapped out. Might as well just do it now before the strain the transmission's putting on the motor breaks the motor or damages the motor. And I went ahead and I drove the car up north, bought the transmission from that shop. That shop had that transmission laying around because they were doing an LS swap on a JKU. So I bought that transmission. I paid the shop for the transmission and for the install, and then once they did the full install, they called me and they mentioned to me, hey, the problem is still persistent. So when they mentioned that the problem was still persistent, I was kind of confused because I figured the transmission was my biggest issue. It just got swapped out. How am I still having the same problem? And I explained to him everything that happened prior to my transmission going out. And one of the things that I mentioned is that I bought a rear axle, installed the rear axle, and right after I installed that rear axle, the transmission started going out. So I genuinely thought it was just bad luck. I thought I was having real bad luck, and I just spent money on a rear axle that I ideally would have avoided buying, and I would have just gone with tons. But like we all know, tons are 20K bare minimum. So long story short, I thought I was having bad luck. He said there might be a chance that you were sold a rear axle with the wrong gear ratio. I did not think that was likely because I bought that rear axle that I have right now from a shop that I thought was a reputable shop. I thought they were a good standing shop, and I thought they were an honest one at that. But long story short, I bought the rear axle, and when I bought the rear axle, I told the shop, hey, according to the dealer's telling me that my gear ratio is, I believe it's either 371 or 373, one of those two numbers, but I'm not too familiar with like stock gear ratios. I know Rubicons come with 410s for the most part, but long story short, I believe my gear ratio was 371 or 373, one of the two. And I clarified to him, hey, just want to make sure my gear ratio is 371. Do you have a rear axle that might happen to have that gear ratio? I'm just looking for a replacement because my rear axle was messed up. There's kind of some more detail as to why my rear axle was messed up. That same shop that I bought that rear axle from installed my drive shafts. I could be wrong. I'm truthfully not like knowledgeable enough to actually determine whether or not the improper installation of drive shafts can damage a rear axle. But the problems I was having with my rear axle is that it was leaking oil, and if I'm not mistaken, the pinion seal was all torn up to the point that it was damaging the actual internals of the rear axle. My rear axle got to a point where it was even squealing. I'm talking about the old rear axle that I had priorly, not now, but my rear axle was squealing as I would like drive the car under like low speeds. And it almost even sounded like when you have a car that you just washed and you're driving and you hit the brakes and the brakes start squealing, kind of like that sound. So I figured sooner or later the car was gonna leave me stranded. I might as well swap out the rear axle. Swapped out the rear axle, spent 700 bucks on that. My transmission went out, or at least I thought. I drove up to a shop up north. I spent more or less 2,500, ballpark of 2,500, more or less 3,000 actually, better said. So I spent ballpark of 3,000 bucks, got the transmission swapped out. It was a long tedious process. The shop had to go ahead and disconnect the transmission from the transfer case, connect it to a new transfer case. I'm pretty sure the car went up on a 2-post lift, Long story short, spent 3,000 bucks on that. The shop called me, hey, I think you have the wrong gear ratio on the rear. We tested it out, we drew a dot on the tire, and according to however many cycles the tire does relating to however many cycles the drive shaft does, you can kind of determine what gear ratio you have in it. And guaranteed, I had the gear ratio of a two-door Jeep. The two-door Jeep gear ratio that I had was a 321, I believe, 321. And long story short, my transmission was never broken or defective in the first place. This whole time, my issue was that I installed a rear axle that had the wrong gear ratio. So that setback set me back around $5,000, I think almost $6,000. So the reason it set me back so much was I bought the axle, 700 bucks. I took the car up north. It was pretty far up north, long story short. And that whole swap alone with the part, I paid around 3,000. And then I still had to buy a rear axle gear ratio, or ring and pinion better said, that matches the front. Now this is where it gets even worse. There was a national back order or outage of stock gears for a JK. Sorry about the planes in the background, guys, but there was a national shortage of gears for stock JKU Sport, and that national back order sent me back on the car like a week. I couldn't operate the car for a week because it was still at the shop up north. I didn't have the car with me for a grand total of like a week and a half trying to get this whole fiasco sorted out. I ended up having to settle for Rubicon gears. So now I have a 410 gear ratio on the rear, and I still have the same stock gear ratio on the front. So being that I have a Rubicon gear ratio on the rear and a stock sport gear ratio on the front drive shaft was then disconnected to not trip out the computer, because the computer or the transmission, either or, the transmission control module would have detected that the gear ratio on the front is not matching the one on the rear. Because when we went ahead and updated the computer to let it know what gear ratio it's running, it would still trip out. I guess even though the car is in two-wheel drive, as you're driving on the street and on the city, it still trips out because it still calculates what the gear ratio is on the front. So long story short, this is now a two-wheel drive Jeep Wrangler as of right now. That problem is going to get sorted out when I do the axle swap. The axle swap, I can order the same gears in the front as the rear, and then that will have kind of like the whole setup it needs for both drive shafts to be connected, of course. And yeah, so as of right now, this is a two-wheel drive Wrangler, 4-door, and that whole setback sent me back like 5,000 bucks. That is the bad news. That setback kind of made me think that I actually probably would have been better off if I would have just bought tons at this point, because where I'm standing right now financially with all the parts and money I've spent on this build as of right now, I was not far from going ahead and just pulling the trigger on tons. And if I would have pulled off the trigger on tons, I would have been a lot happier than I am now. It is what it is. You live and you learn. It's all mistakes. It happens to me. I wouldn't say everybody, but I don't know if it happens to everybody. It happened, whatever, it is what it is. And you live and you learn. So those are the bad news regarding the build. As far as the good news, kind of to get on a better note. So as for the good news, in the near future, I was planning on doing a drivetrain swap. So I figured I might as well buy parts to kind of like accommodate for that drivetrain swap. As you guys can see, one of the parts that I purchased is an aftermarket hood. This new aftermarket hood has two vents on the sides. The two vents are almost kind of like the vents you would see on a JL Rubicon, except these have a little more functionality. So for example, on the JL Rubicon that I recorded in the last video, there are vents literally in this same style, but on the bottom side there's a carpet, so the vents aren't truly functional. It comes like that from factory. I'm sure there's options where you can do a cutout on the carpet, or just delete the whole carpet as a whole, and then the vents will be functional. This is a fiberglass hood. It is not a metal hood, so it is lighter than a metal hood. And on the bright side, this has kind of like a thin layer of fiberglass on the bottom side of the vents. It comes like that from factory. As of right now, I still have the V6 in here, so eventually when I do the V8, I can go ahead and do a cutout on the bottom side, just like this line right here, only on the bottom side, of course, and that will allow for true heat dissipation when I do have the V8 in there. If I want to get even more functional with that whole cutout, I could also consider the possibility of doing a metal tray right here with an opening on the back and the front, so that the heat dissipation still occurs, but then if there's a metal tray underneath the vents, if it happens to be raining, it won't rain directly on the engine, but rather on the metal tray. The heat from the engine will heat up the tray so much that if rain lands on it, correct me if I'm wrong, this is just an idea, if the rain lands through these vents onto the heated metal tray, it will go ahead and turn into smoke, so the actual rain wouldn't hit the engine. I'm sure if it's pouring, I mean, I'm giving ideas. If I'm wrong, let me know, guys, but I have seen people who go ahead and do a cutout on the bottom side just like this, like I was saying, and it does allow for more heat dissipation. The center scoop, the center vent, it does actually function. It has a whole route that goes like this, and it drops right here. Where it drops right here, it drops on top of the cold air intake. Let me see if I can go ahead and show you guys. Before I go ahead and raise the hood, I also wanted to show you guys it has sprayers because I added them myself. This is quite the project. It seems very small, but I had to drill into this hood, and it's a fiberglass hood. I had a very big concern with the whole idea of like cracking the hood, but I did it correctly. The sprayers do work. I had to adjust the sprayers, and it sprays kind of mid-screen. And yeah, so I did the sprayers, I had the hood color matched, and I also did some modifications to the cold air intake so it does have full functionality with the hood. Let me see if I can show you guys. And yeah, so I'm just gonna hold up the hood, but as you guys can see, that is the hole that would be for the leg of the hood. The hood routes through there and drops off right there, so that air tunnel would then drop right here. So in the first two videos, one of the two, I went ahead and I displayed the cold air intake that I have. The cold air intake that I used to have here, this is still the same one, except I just changed the top. So it used to be a glass display that showed the SMB logo, but SMB also offered an option to go ahead and just kind of do this lip right here. And with this lip, I went ahead and I also added a cold air intake filter, I guess you can call it, like, not a cold air intake filter, a cold air intake mask, I guess you can call it, like a mesh. And that mesh goes ahead and protects it from rain, so if it does happen to rain, seep through there, it'll slip off since it is covered in a mesh mask. And yeah, so the hood does have functionality. It is functional. One of the biggest things that I wanted to prioritize when I was doing an aftermarket hood is I didn't want it to be a flashy hood, something too like loud and tacky. I wanted it to be something subtle. From the front, it does look a lot more aggressive, but I think it has to do with the fact that the mesh on the hood is silver. At some point, I would like to paint that mesh black, and at some point, I would like to have a mesh behind my grille also black. So a mesh behind my grille, probably the same as this, truthfully, and just paint both of them black, because I'm trying to steer away from silver on this build. For the most part, I don't have silver anywhere else on this build except for the round trim on the headlights. The headlights are a little faded out, sorry about that. But that pretty much covers the first modification that I've done to the build, which is the hood. Since I went ahead and I bought a hood and I was gonna have it paint matched to the color of the car, I figured I might as well just go ahead and buy all the other parts that I'm paint matching as well. So I also bought some Genrite rock guard plates, and they have been paint matched to the color of the car. And one thing that I've been told is if you paint match the body armor, you won't be able to tell it's there. So just to make sure that people can tell it is a Genrite rock guard plate, I had a shop go ahead and do a matte black, or better said satin wrap, right behind the Genrite logo so it stands out. Eventually, when the build is on tons and everything, I will be putting the brands that I have here on the top. So it'll say Genrite, for example, then it can say PRP, KMC, King. Eventually, when I do the LS, I might put an LS sticker. But that pretty much covers the second modification that I've done. I do plan on running other body armor from Genrite. For example, I want to run their rock sliders, if I'm saying the right name. Yeah, rock sliders. The rock sliders I plan on ordering are the steel ones, kind of like the tubed ones. Those will be painted to match with bumpers, so it'll be kind of like a bit of a matte black as well. So that covers the side modification I've done. Another thing that I purchased from Genrite was they sell a cap to cover the little, I guess, hole where you used to have the license plate carrier. For those of you who have a JK, you know exactly what I'm talking about. A stock JK underneath the driver taillight has the license plate from factory. I moved the license plate from there to the tailgate. So then that section, I had a cap that said TerraFlex on it. That cap was getting sun faded. It was kind of scuffed up. So I've always wanted to kind of just leave that area of the car flush. So I paid the body shop that worked on paint matching all these parts to go ahead and just cover that small corner. So they went ahead and did body work on the rear driver corner. Let me see, I'm gonna show you guys. Putting a flashlight on it so you can see it even more. But as you can see, it's almost like it was like that from factory, and I can guarantee you it was not. So if you guys go back on my old videos, you can see that I used to have a little cap on there that said TerraFlex. I'm not sure if you guys can tell, but I also did take off the decals that used to say Wrangler and Unlimited Sport or whatever. So those have been taken off. So I guess it's been debadged, I guess you can say, as far as the side panels go. So it's debadged, aftermarket hood, aftermarket rock guard plates, body corner work done with the Genrite cap that they sell on their website. And I also have an Artec Industries license plate carrier. The Artec Industries license plate carrier, I also had that paint matched to the color of the car. It's the one that kind of protrudes out back. I thought it was nice because I've seen it on other builds, and I thought it would look nice on this one. It's okay, it's not bad, but ideally I think I do want to now steer towards the Genrite one, the Genrite license plate carrier, because it's a lot flatter. So I guess on departure angle, it would kind of give a little more clearance. It's 2 inches, 3 inches of clearance, but I think it would also look nicer just having a flatter license plate carrier on the tailgate. So at some point in the near future, I would like to go ahead and swap that out. I would also like to swap out my inner fenders for some Genrite inner fenders. Genrite came out with the new front bumper, and I've been looking into it, and it looks very nice. It's very big on high clearance, and ideally I've seen, for example, so I've seen videos from Tech Talk, not TikTok, Tech Talk, where they go ahead and show all the newest parts they're coming out with. And with the new Terremoto build, the front axle is stretched forward 2 inches and the rear axle is stretched 1 inch. So when I was looking at that build with the new front bumper, there is practically like the most ideal approach angle I've seen on most builds, where the tire is practically like lined up right with the front bumper, and that front bumper allows for a winch. So one thing that I also kind of want to address regarding this setup right now, the front bumper has been doing the job. It's definitely held up very well, but if I did run a winch, I do come across the inconvenience that my winch would go ahead and go from here up. So being that it would sit on this bumper, it would kind of like block the airflow coming into my grill. So with the new Genrite front bumper that has the hole that allows for the winch to be there, I can go ahead and install that. And then on top of that, if I get a winch from Warren, for example, that allows for the relocation bracket for the control box module, I can go ahead and relocate that control box module inside of my engine bay. If I do that, I would then ideally have a flat front bumper with a winch inside that has a better approach angle than this. And then if I did the front stretch of 2 inches, maybe just maybe 3 inches, and on the back 1 inch or whatever, my approach angle would be the same on the bumper than it is on the tire. So that is kind of like what I believe would be the ideal setup. I'm very intrigued with the new bumper that Genrite came out with, and ideally I will be installing it sometime in the near future. So that, and then eventually I might as well go ahead and swap out the rear bumper as well to a Genrite one. So that pretty much covers the plans for the build. For sure, the next modifications I will be doing will be more towards functionality. I will say, if I do go through with doing the Genrite bumpers, it is gonna look sick, and it will definitely get me closer to my ideal setup on this build. But truthfully, this build is just gonna get to a point where it's gonna be so, I guess you can say, aggressive, that it'll kind of look a little goofy in my eyes compared to the tire size that it's running right now. Like I said in my last video regarding this build, I'm running some 33s off of what I believe is a Gladiator Rubicon, and yeah, it does the job. Of course, I don't have four-wheel drive, but it does the job for sure. But one thing I will mention is I feel this build needs definitely bigger tires. At the bare minimum, like I said, I'm going to be doing a 40, and if I do go through with doing the 40, it'll definitely fill up the space a lot more. especially if I do the stretch. So the bumper would look amazing with the stretch, tons, kings, the whole 9 yards, but I don't exactly have the whole 9 yards with me, and financially for sure, with the whole recent incident that I came across, I definitely do not have the whole setup I need to go and pull through with this build. So point of the story is I pretty much want to see if I can prioritize functionality. If I do prioritize functionality, ideally the next modification I purchase will be a PSC steering kit. If I did buy the PSC steering kit, it would be the setup I need for the tons. So I'll be able to install part of the kit. If I install part of the kit, at least it'll kind of help out with like the functionality. Like it'll be something I'll feel as I'm driving the car. For example, one of the parts that I have sitting around are the Rock Jock sway bars for the front and the rear. I have both the front and the rear sway bars, but I have yet to install it because I don't have the lift. So it kind of just sucks seeing the parts sit around. So if I do go through with buying the PSC steering kit with the Hydro Assist, I'll at least be able to install part of the kit, and that part of the kit I'll see if I can, like, you know, feel the improvement of having the aftermarket upgraded parts regarding steering, and then that will help me out when I do tons because I already have the steering kit. So that pretty much covers kind of like the news regarding like the parts that I've done, some of the updates regarding the build, and some of the plans regarding the upcoming parts. Another thing I want to mention, good news, I have been talking with some companies that I plan on running a lot of their parts, and I am being considered for a sponsorship. If I actually get considered for the sponsorship and everything goes through as I would hope so, that would mean that I would then be able to afford their parts a little more easily, which would then make it easier to progress this build. If I do hopefully pull through with the offer or with the whole plan, then that means that I will be definitely upgrading this a lot faster than I would if I were just to be buying it as a everyday person who's just buying parts at regular price. So that covers that. Any future events I'll be attending will be, for example, Daytona Jeep Beach. I'll be at Daytona Jeep Beach for the last 3 days of the event. Hopefully at the event I'll be able to buy some parts for this build. I'm not sure if PSC is going to be there, but hopefully I'll buy like some small parts. I'll definitely be doing some content regarding the builds that I see there, and that pretty much covers, for the most part, the most recent changes to the build. Cover the bad, the good, the plans, and yeah, that pretty much covers the whole video. In the last video, when I showed you guys the interior, I showed it to you guys and it was nighttime. I'm gonna see if I can go ahead and show it to you guys now that it's daytime, so you can kind of see the interior in a daytime perspective. Also wanted to show the side profile of the hood. I am content with how subtle it looks. The front looks a little flashy and tacky, but I think it's just the fact that the mesh for the hood is still in silver, and I just have to go ahead and paint that black, because at night it does look a lot nicer when the mesh is kind of in a shadow and it looks darker. Ideally I'll be doing the Gen Right fenders, inner fenders next. I already have the Gen Right fenders. Sorry, I'll let the plane pass by. All right, there. Ideally I'll be doing the Gen Right inner fenders in the near future, and I know that's cosmetic, but I kind of just want to go scratch that itch already so I can get that over with. But let me see if I can go ahead and show you guys the interior now that we're kind of in a little more well-lit circumstance. And yeah, that pretty much covers the video. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, don't feel any hesitation to comment. If you guys enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully if I see you guys at Daytona Jeep Beach, you guys say hi. I don't know if you guys will even recognize me. I'm just a regular guy recording his Jeep. But yeah, that pretty much covers the video. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Take care. Peace. Bye.